Brandon Thurston from WrestleNomics is up next, and we're going to follow Brandon with John Pollock from Post Wrestling.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone.
But we can't ignore the math, okay? We can't ignore the data.
Go on Google Trends, type in your name, then type in mine. You're a straight line, I'm a pyramid.
I like the very direct question on that.
Television ratings, downward spiral. Buy rates, plummeting.
The time is now to turn the math around.
And hello, everybody. Welcome to the post-WrestleMania edition of Pollock and Thurston. We are not going to be going through Night 1 and Night 2, the highlights of which, yes, that is right, the froth after WrestleMania. Thank you, Søren. Brandon is here with us, coming off of a very impactful weekend in the history of professional wrestling. We have acquisitions, we have scathing comments, we have mainstream media interview appearances. Everything and all is going to be covered over the next expanded edition of Pollock and Thurston. We're going past the hour mark today because not one, but two guests, as we are going to be tackling the acquisition by WWE of AAA. I guess we need to decide right now what we are going to go with as our official pronunciation of choice over this next 90 minutes.
I've heard that you use the best of both English and Spanish. You will say triple A as opposed to triple A, right?
Yeah, triple A.
It's half English, half Spanish.
I'm trying to appease all audiences and to some people's grand disagreements. So I will follow your lead, Brandon, if we want to go.
We're
with
speaking
that.
English, so I guess I will call it triple A.
Okay, we will go with that for today. You want to AAA?
You could do that.
A cubed. All of that is going to be discussed on today's show. We are going to be joined by Barbara Gonzalez Briceño. She is the co-CEO of Philippe. Who is Philippe? Well, they are a capital investment company that is very much a part of this acquisition with WWE of AAA, and she is going to be joining us to talk about sort of this entire transaction, which is still in the process of being finalized. She will be joining us at 2 p.m. Eastern time to talk about what is a very, very significant news story, which was revealed on Saturday just before the start of the main show of Night 1 of WrestleMania. Also here to discuss specifically the wrestling end of it is first-time guest, surprisingly, here on this show. He is the Cubas Fan from Luchablog.com. Probably a much-needed resource for many people that are trying to wrap their head around all of this, and I'm sure he has had a proliferation of traffic over the last couple of days. He will join us as well to talk about what this means for the Mexican wrestling market, what this means for CMLL, and Mexico becoming a real big battleground territory, and WWE extending itself far beyond what I think many expected, at least in terms of what their strategy would be of going into these different territories and outright acquiring a company, not the least of which is one that has over 30 years of brand value behind it.
Yeah, it was a surprise to me that they would buy any wrestling company, considering the antitrust concerns I believe that they would have, given the antitrust lawsuit that UFC has been involved in, the MLW antitrust lawsuit that WWE was involved in. It's been the reason that I've pointed to say they're not going to buy TNA. Now, TNA is another U.S.-based, or at least U.S. and Canada-based wrestling organization. But when it comes to Mexico and Japan, I do think it's important if they are going to take over the world, disregarding everybody's concerns with that. But if they are going to take over the world, that you would want to make some sort of purchase or get some kind of get associated, a partnership with somebody who's very ingrained in the culture there, whether that be in Mexico or Japan. Obviously, in this case, it's Mexico. And it raises questions, I think, maybe about, what kind of partnerships they may deepen in Japan too.
Does this at all change your thought process when it comes to some of the relationships that they have out there? Do you feel like this is an anomaly with AAA, or do you feel like this could just be the blueprint to see where things go? And as they want to expand, it is like you have these infrastructures in place and other promotions worldwide that they may look at as in terms of outright purchasing instead of partnering with.
Yeah, I think it's encouraging. If we're just thinking about WWE's strategies, I think it's encouraging. The problem would be if they just like went right into just launched on their own and say a WWE NXT. Think about the big map that Paul Levesque stood in front of in 2018 and whatever it was. If they just launched like an NXT Mexico into Mexico and an NXT Japan all on their own and tried to recruit talent and tried to promote, starting from scratch, I think that would be difficult and that might not work out. You had WWE UK happen and you can point to the pandemic, but on the other hand, NXT Europe has been talked about for years now and is not launched yet.
It still exists, according to Paul Levesque last week.
As an idea, I guess, it exists.
So Glocal is back. Okay, it's back. We will get to a lot of that. That will be a big focus of the show. But we have this little event called WrestleMania to go through first because we have lots of fallout. Before we get into all the numbers, the success of the many, many events that were staged in and around Las Vegas, Brandon, did you have any overall impressions coming out of the weekend? Did you consume any of the nights of WrestleMania? And did you see from afar, this was, obviously a record-setting set of shows for the company on top of it?
I did turn it on my TV. It was on. I can confirm that Peacock was on and the pay-per-view premium live event, did play. I was just listening to some of Paul Levesque's press conferences before we went to air here. He did mention that that on Saturday he did say that this was the biggest single event gate in WWE history, which would mean that it was somewhere over the $18.4 million of night 2 last year. And he didn't get into specifics the next day, and the press release that they've put out has not gotten into specifics, but he was confident that the following day, that this year Sunday would be even higher than this year Saturday. So we have
said they would smash it. Okay, it's not going to just be. Yeah, which last year, and the man to my right here was the one that did break this news last year about WrestleMania 40, which night 1 sold 56,147 tickets, and they had just over 60,000 at Lincoln Financial Field with comps for a gate of $17.6 million. Night 2 selling 56,758, so almost like about 600 more tickets were sold for night 2, very comparable, and the gate for night 2 of $18.4 million. So when it comes to even when you're including like the comps, they announced attendance figures of about like 11 to 12,000 above what they actually had in the building. So the Paul Levesque era was still the era of slight inflation, even though these were literally the biggest shows the company had ever held up until this past weekend.
Maybe there were, 5,000 sweet attendees. I don't know.
There were about 10,000 people in that media box, so
there were a lot. I could see a few thousand in suites.
Yes.
The numbers that they announced this year were very close to the numbers that WrestleTix was estimating. I know WrestleTix might still do a final estimate, but just over 60,000 for each night, and we figure somewhere around $20 million for each gate. I was hoping that they would give us some sort of percentage difference on the gate. We did not get any of that. They did not take my bait on that. The number to beat the record for inflation would be $23 million, which is what the $17.3 million gate of WrestleMania 32 in 2016 was worth. Now, in today's dollars, $23 million. It might have reached that, but we don't know.
I just going off like my own like eye test, like would not surprise me at all. Like the pricing of this year's show was just extraordinary. There's an amazing clip on TikTok of these fans that found Randy Orton in a lobby and were just chatting with him about the tickets that they bought. And Randy Orton is like blown away. He's like, that's so much money for these tickets. Which it was. Listen, and it was full on both nights. So the press release that came out, I know, Brandon, you were excited when they said that we will be releasing all of these numbers, all these records, and we got our favorite. It's percentage differences, except for the gate, which was as vague as possible. WrestleMania 41 generated the largest gate for any event in WWE history. The premium live event drew 124,693 fans across 2 nights at Allegiant Stadium. So no numbers attached to the gate, which used to be a staple. Like every year they put out the press release and the attendance would always be the WWE promoted attendance, but the gate was their gate figure, including ticket fees. But regardless, like, you were getting the legit gate figure, and over years they have stopped putting out the gate number.
I speculate that's because the UFC ticket prices are so high, and we got a number. Do you have it on hand? We have the UFC pay-per-view number, the gate that just came out this morning that we found.
Yeah, this was the UFC 313 show from March. So this was the Alex Pereira Magomed Ankalaev fight at the T-Mobile Arena, and we got the updated stats here as I'm just pulling them up.
$9.7 million at T-Mobile Arena on March 8th for the UFC 313 pay-per-view. Yeah,
so it was slightly below. The night of, they had announced just over 18,000 and a just over $10 million gate. So the Polestar number was just slightly below that. But yeah, I mean, that was.
I'm sorry. Did I say 9.7? 9.969. It's really a $10 million.
Yeah, basically. It was slightly below what they had announced at the press conference right after 313. But yeah, that was the comparable here. But yeah, as Brandon noted, like, I would imagine conservatively each night did around $21 million. I think that would be a conservative number given the gigantic uptick in pricing this year, and certainly sets the table for whatever the pricing structure will be for next year as well in New Orleans for 2 nights.
Yes, and you might get Dwayne Johnson next year, maybe.
How many steps ahead is that?
That's a lot of steps.
We might only be at step 9 by next week, or by next year, and it's not till 20 steps in that we're going to get the full plan. But hey, just be quiet, enjoy the ride he's taking you on. Yes. Viewership. So this one, Brandon, you did some good investigative work here. WrestleMania 41 was the most viewed WrestleMania of all time, up 114% from the record set last year at WrestleMania 40. And this jumped out at both of us. I mean, that Peacock, yes, it has. Over the past year, they had the big bump after the Summer Olympics last year. There are more subscribers for Peacock, but to more than double last year sounded insane to me. And there is a important caveat here to how this number was figured.
Right. And so last year, WrestleMania was. How did you watch WrestleMania last year?
Sitting next to you and watching it
on
the monitor. But yes, it would have been on the WWE Network for me in Canada.
Yes. So, and I think that's a story for much of the world. I think there are some licensing deals at that time last year. India might have been Sony Live. I believe there's some countries in the APAC region that were Disney Hotstar. But for the most part, it's the direct-to-consumer WWE Network still. And now we're on Netflix that a lot of people just have, and probably a lot of people who didn't have the W Network last year checking it out and tuning in, and that's accounting for, well, that's factored in certainly. NBC Universal confirmed that. Deadline had a lead first sentence in their story yesterday, making it sound like it was just Peacock, and I emailed NBCU and they got back to me and confirmed that does include Netflix. So we don't know what the Peacock to Peacock difference was domestically in the United States.
Yeah, and we'll get into the rankings that came out, which were reflective of the worldwide consumption of WrestleMania on Netflix. Of course, not incorporated.
I was hoping it was going to make the top 10 for that we would get right away, because Royal Rumble did make the top 10 back in early February. It was number 10, and remember, of course, this is not including U.S. viewership, so that doesn't help out the total. Because Raw continues to make it every week, as it did in the most recent disclosure here. But the bottom of the top 10 for the most recently disclosed top 10 chart is 2.7 million global views. So it was somewhere under there. I believe Royal Rumble was 2.1 million. So I would imagine it would stand to reason. I would think that both nights were above what Royal Rumble was, but apparently just under 2.7 million.
Yeah, Saturday's show was number 3 in Canada, and Sunday was number 6 in Canada. But remember, like, this is the Sunday show has like a whole less 24 hours to incorporate in it, and I'm sure next week's rankings probably the Sunday show will probably be reflected there. We'll get into those stats after, but let's continue on with this press release that came out. The merchandise in partnership with Fanatics, merchandise sales on site were up more than 45% versus the previous all-time record set last year, making WrestleMania 41 the highest grossing event of all time. Additionally, e-commerce sales were up 86% against last year's numbers. So a lot of merchandise sold, and I know the hot item that everyone was looking at this past weekend, Brandon, would be this one here at the at the World. Finally, The Rock has come back to Las Vegas.
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder how many of those sold.
He wasn't there, though.
He was not there, but the merch department sure did get that memo.
Oh.
He was never going to be here. He stepped away. So
Yeah.
anyway, there
Okay.
you go. A lot of merchandise sold.
Yes.
The World looked to be just flooded whenever you saw photos of this. Sponsorships. Do you want to guess if sponsorship was up year over year? It was, folks. It featured a record 28 total partners and set an all-time event record for revenue. Too many to count. This WrestleMania weekend flooded with on-screen sponsorships. I mean, the grin on Mark Shapiro's face in the front row on night one, very indicative of the fact either he was having a great time at WrestleMania or he was a satisfied Dude Wipes customer. He was very happy.
Not just sponsorships, but brand integrations.
That's right.
I saw the War Raiders come out in their Clash of Clans outfits. And they're, that's the kind of opportunity that WWE provides that you can, and we saw it too with AEW somewhat, right, in the in Assassin's Creed with Osprey's entrance.
How do you feel like from what you did get to see in terms of the kind of amalgamating these sponsorships into it? Do you feel that they have struck a balance? Like, do you sense that there is a pushback amongst audience to this, or do you think that they have largely incorporated this and because this has been one where I think for wrestling fans, it's one where it's been a very significant changeover just over the past year in terms of all of these. How do you feel they've introduced this into the body of the program?
I heard a lot of complaints about downtime and about ad time, including from some people who maybe don't watch every PLE. I heard somebody say this was maybe the most downtime for any WWE PLE to date in terms of the amount of duration the entire program ran versus the amount of actual match time.
It was 7 matches in 4 hours over both nights. I mean, I did not find it to be like a show that dragged, but I also kind of like those breaks in between matches too. So anyway, maybe I'm not the best person. On Location, the exclusive hospitality experience partner saw a 75% increase. WWE World, it ran for 5 days. They cited over 50,000 attendees, 21% increase over last year's surrounding. And when it comes to social, it was the most socially viewed WWE event of all time, generating 1.1 billion social views throughout the weekend. And its YouTube channel saw its most viewed day ever on WrestleMania Sunday. So there you go. Those were the highlights from WWE's end of what was their most successful WrestleMania of all time. And it was one that, I mean, there's like from a business side, like you have to look at this, the fact that you incorporate the fact that this was a down weekend for Las Vegas that they wanted to fill for Easter weekend, and WWE, I think, successfully achieved what they set out to do. And we'll get into this a little later on when it comes to future bids on WrestleMania and one particular city that has now got an approval to go ahead with a significant amount of money for various TKO events.
A teaser. Yeah. In terms of live events, I was thinking to compare it to last year. And you had the Hall of Fame, which was not its own event last year, right? It was just part of SmackDown. It's its own theater event. And this year they did the roast of WrestleMania with Tony Hinchcliffe. It was its own theater event. NXT,
the Undertaker show.
The Undertaker show, which did happen last year. NXT, which is not on this chart, but did happen last year. But so they got more live events out of this, as well as I don't know what happened with WrestleMania After Dark, but they did that as well.
Yeah, I mean it's and again, if you go to Brandon's reporting last year, Stand and Deliver alone last year did $1 million gate in Philadelphia. I would imagine they did similar this year, if not above that. That's the one I imagine, just of the amount of talent they crammed onto that. I can see that becoming a 2-day show over WrestleMania weekend as well, like a Saturday and Sunday afternoon show. I think that there is the opportunity to just continue to pile on to this weekend. And I think the demand will be there for this. If you can do $1 million gate on a Saturday afternoon, the day of your big show, I think they will run this team ragged if there is the opportunity for it. And I think that's Sunday afternoon. It's like, it's actually a quiet day, Mania weekend, until the show that night.
Yeah, I'm sure, to some extent, the independent events that have run around WrestleMania for years and years should inform them. To some extent, that is people wanting some alternative wrestling flavor while they're visiting, while they're going to WrestleMania maybe. But you would think that if you're WWE, like that, all that revenue, all that business should be ours. And how can we make it ours?
Yeah, that was, to me, a consistent throughout this weekend especially, was just expanding so much, both in terms of, our core events that we're producing, but also these other, like the WrestleMania After Dark ideas, having this host hotel that we could stage all of these different events. I think the roast became like this real curiosity ticket for many people. The fact that it was not going to be recorded, I think, added to the intrigue of this show. And you've seen some clips that have leaked. That seemed like pretty benign stuff that came out, but it will be interesting to see like what events they bring back next year and continue to really have a hold on these events, because outside of the WWE events, like your big successes were like Joey Janela's Spring Break. Apparently, like GCW said they did about 2,000 for that show, and that's kind of at the highest of the non-WWE events of the weekend. I think we have passed that era where, you're not getting a Supercard of Honor, you're not having just the plethora of all the big unsigned stars that are doing these dream matches, and every indie show is going to do their big record audience of the year. Like that time has passed versus, over the last 5 to 9 years when that was really at its peak. I think up until the pandemic, when it kind of slowed after that.
Yeah, I guess if Evolve becomes a strong enough brand, they're on Tubi. You could see Evolve returning to WrestleMania weekend, maybe in one of those theater events.
All right. Well, there you go. Those are some of the topics coming out of WrestleMania, just from the business side of things. We did have the Hall of Fame on Friday night, which started at 1 a.m. Eastern time and clocked in at over 3 hours, finishing off with a 1-hour address by the chief content officer himself, Paul Levesque, who had many people to thank, from family, friends, mentors, and including the elephant in the room.
And now there's one thing that I've skirted around all night long, but I've got to talk about it, and that's Vince. It's a complicated story and a complicated relationship, but in so many ways I would not be here without him. Not just in my business life, which would be enough on its own. My career, he's the one that saw something in me creatively, invited me to those production meetings, taught me, let me sit under that learning tree, and encouraged me to sit under the Pat learning tree and continue to learn. But also in my personal life, my family. He wasn't just my boss. He wasn't just a friend. He wasn't just a mentor. He would become my father-in-law. He's my wife, the person I love the most in this world. He's her father. He's my kid's grandfather. So it's complicated. He taught me so much, what to do, what not to do. I'm grateful for all those lessons. I love you, Vince. And thank you.
So that was Paul Levesque bringing up Vince McMahon at the Hall of Fame ceremony. And this, I would say, was like the most public mention of Vince McMahon that WWE has made since January of 2024. And, we have talked about the idea of how the audience would respond to Vince. And in this, a Hall of Fame setting, I would call it a pretty controlled environment. I wasn't expecting kind of a negative response to it, but that was, it was very clear that it was met with approval of what was a small audience, but a pretty hardcore audience nonetheless, that was very receptive to Vince McMahon's name being mentioned. And I can't say I was necessarily expecting that would be part of the speech, but opted to do so. And it was certainly indicative of like where the audience is at when it comes to Vince McMahon, at least a portion of it.
Yeah, I mean, even before the Grant lawsuit came out, he was always. I mean, there's still allegations, right? There's still Wall Street Journal reporting. There's still investigation by the board, and he's been careful about what he has said. I know he uses a word like complicated. I just hopefully Paul Levesque writes a really honest book someday, because I'm sure that has been a fascinating last several years of their relationship. Not that surprising, I guess, that there was that kind of reaction. Although I think the Hall of Fame, that's probably as gracious a wrestling crowd as you're going to get, right? Because these are people we're honoring their career and letting them talk for as long as they want about all the great moments in their career and who they want to thank. But yeah, I guess I didn't expect that is of all places probably the last place you're going to get a really hostile reaction, right? Or a reaction that you don't want. Yeah.
Yeah, it really did juxtapose as well, because just days before we had seen the New York Times feature on John Cena where he spoke about his love for Vince McMahon, and you see what the online response to that was a largely negative one, and you contrast this to an in-person event at a WWE show, which I agree with Brandon, probably the most gracious audience you're going to have in that kind of a setting. But that said, as I've always believed, I feel if Vince McMahon were to walk out on WWE television, I think it would still be a positive response from the audience by and large as well. But I don't think that theory is going to be tested anytime soon. But it does tell you sort of the difference. And this is an audience that, listen, they were very quick to boo certain celebrities at WrestleMania over the next two nights. But I think with Vince McMahon, it was just an interesting test of putting his name out there, and it was hardly a rejection of Vince McMahon. If you want to look at it as an endorsement of Vince, I wouldn't go that far, but it was certainly a receptive audience to that is how a fan base is going to still revere Vince McMahon throughout all of this.
Yeah, and I guess you view it by de facto as some sort of test of like how safe is it just to mention his name or to include him in video montages of our history when it's relevant to do that. But yeah, I don't think we're going to be seeing Vince McMahon on television ever again. Before we move off Triple H in the Hall of Fame, can someone explain this image to me of this statue that of Paul Levesque?
Which one's the statue? Yeah, this was a wax figure at the World.
Oh, so people could stand next to it while he's looking at them and take pictures, I see.
Yes. How many indie wrestlers came and did photo ops with this for their social media?
I don't know. Not enough.
That was quite the frightening image that I woke up to one morning last week. Well, everybody, other news that people, took in on Saturday, it was the acquisition. So earlier in the day on Saturday, I believe it was WrestleVotes that was the first to report that WWE was set to do a show with AAA, with the Worlds Collide show that was officially announced for the Kia Forum June 7th. So that was kind of out there on Saturday morning. And then lo and behold, about an hour or so into the pre-show on Saturday, we get this image where we all of a sudden see El Hijo del Vikingo with Marcela Peña, Dorian Rodon, and all WWE lucha adjacent talent surrounding Paul Levesque as Michael Cole announces that we are not partnering with them for a show. We are acquiring AAA. And I think it's caught many people off guard, but we now bring in someone to make sense of this for everybody. He runs Luchablog, which we encourage everyone to go check out at luchablog.com. The Cubs fan is here with us. Cubs, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you on. We've actually wanted to have you on for quite some time. Thought this would be a great chance to chat with you. Now that it's been a couple of days, what have you sensed in terms of the online reaction, primarily from the audience that is following AAA on a semi-regular basis? What the overall impressions have been, whether it be optimism or pessimism that you have seen directly since Saturday's announcement?
It's been mixed. There's a lot of AAA fans who are also following WB at some sort of level. So combining those two, they see the optimistic way where we might get to see some big WB stars on Triple Manias going forward. But there's also a big fear that this is going to change what AAA is at this point, with someone else with it becoming less of a Mexican product and more similar to the other shows that WWE does.
And Pollock did address it on without even taking a question on it on Saturday, and he said the right things. He said things to the effect of that he's a big fan of lucha. He said big fan of Lucha Libre, and he understands that it's a deep part of Mexican culture. So he's saying the right things. But then again, I can understand how people could worry that it's going to reduce the authenticity of Lucha Libre.
Yeah, and there hasn't been much talk from the AAA side since this announcement. There was the press release on Monday that said that they were going to continue AAA, that the story of AAA would be going on and the best things are still to come. But there's no one who's gone out in the camera and said, okay, all the stuff that we said that we were going to do this year, this big Landlover Alberto match we've been promoting for most of the year. No one's come out and said, yeah, we're still doing that sort of stuff. Jose Manuel Guillen, who is the AAA play-by-play voice, did come out with his own podcast and said that as far as he knows, everything in AAA is continuing as normal at this point, that it was just a normal day at the office on Monday after announcement, that all the shows that are planned are still going to happen. But there hasn't been like an official AAA spokesperson out there telling what the situation is.
When it comes to people that are just kind of assessing AAA, how would you categorize like the health of the company over the last several years? And now looking sort of in hindsight, did this seem like something that is more plausible when you put together various factors? And yeah, just explain to people kind of where AAA stands right now in the Mexican market.
The health of AAA has seemed like it's declined. It really hasn't been as much the wrestling shows, although look, they were struggling about like the end of 2024 and end of 2023, and then made some changes in 2024 that produced a positive year as far as business, as far as quality, not as much. But they've made some outside investments of trying to start what was like a themed Lucha Libre restaurant that did not go great for them. They've cut down on talent they've used. They're running less shows and less TV tapings. It seems like there's a tighter budget going on with AAA in recent years than past years. And in the big picture, AAA's, I mean, it's important that the show is called Worlds Collide, that this AAA WB show is going to be, because AAA's big goal since that time when they were in the mid 90s, where they had a great strength in Los Angeles and California, is to go back to doing that, get that money from running shows in the US. So they've been, for the last decade or so, they've been looking for a partner who would help them to run the US and make that extra money that they're not making in Mexico so they could run both places. And I think this WB deal is like the final idea to finally get that done, is that they could not do it themselves, but maybe if they sell it to some other company, that they'll be able to bridge that gap and run both the US and Mexico.
Yeah. And could you briefly explain to listeners who might not know the hope that AAA has had for years and years, maybe throughout its entire history, the notion that you could break into the U.S. is, with a large and growing Hispanic population and a large and growing Spanish-speaking population, and there's always been speculation and rumors about that. And just could you briefly explain what some of their strategies have been?
They've had a bunch of different partners over the years. They've had obviously the one that most fans are familiar with. It was Lucha Underground, where they were a partner with a few other companies in trying to get Lucha Libre in that way. But that was, as much as it's well remembered, it did not draw enough viewers to really survive, and it made like slight attempts to run live shows, but they were also not successful. They had like a late 2000s tour where they partnered with I believe a cheese sponsor to run some shows in Las Vegas and Los Angeles and other cities. And it drew maybe half houses. They never went back again. They had a one-off show in Arizona about a couple of years ago. They had the Madison Square Garden show that was supposed to be part of running a stadium series, but instead got moved to what's the Hulu Theater at this point. They drew well, but the problem with AAA is they have these one-off ideas where they have a big plan, they can do the first part of it, but they haven't been able to do well enough or to sustain the idea for long enough to really make a mark to this point. So they've been their feeling is that they haven't been able to find a good partner in the U.S. to work with who will support them. So the WWE is like the best partner you can have for this if you really want to do this.
And what's your read on, certainly AAA is one of the top promotions, one of the two top promotions in Mexico. And just what's the relative popularity right now in Mexico as it concerns AAA and CMLL? My impression has always been CMLL is very popular in Mexico City. That's where they own their venues, and AAA is more popular throughout the rest of the country. Is that still your read on it?
It's still broadly that case, but AAA, especially in the last couple of years, have concentrated more on running Mexico City, and it still means that they're the second biggest promotion. Like, they will run tapings on Saturday night, the same day that CML is running Arena Coliseum with just a normal show, and the CML show will still outdraw them. But I believe that like the Triple Mania would still be the biggest show in Mexico City this year. If they want to run more places outside Mexico City, I think they would be the better drawing option with CML. But for either promotional reasons or for financial reasons, they just have not run outside Mexico City as much in the last year and a half.
And would you look at, from the WWE standpoint, would it be advantageous for them to largely keep the existing infrastructure in place? And long term, do you expect that transition to occur with WWE placing its people and operating in a different country?
I think for short term, it's essential that they keep the people who are running, who maybe not like the top executives, but the people who are interacting with the wrestlers and all the local promoters they're working with. They need to keep those in place and understand what they're doing. The AAA business model is more like they aren't running their shows for ticket sales. They are loaning out wrestlers to local promoters who pay them a flat fee no matter what the show's gross. So either WWE is going to either change that business model, or they need to learn to understand how AAA is currently operating with that. There's a lot of intricacies with working in the foreign country that like WWE is like familiar from running a couple shows in Mexico a year, but running these small shows that AAA runs in small cities, if they're going to still do that, then they definitely need to keep around the people who know how to do that.
If you look at this, I'm asking you to kind of look into your crystal ball here. What is the best case scenario for this if everything is in alignment and where we are 12 to 18 months for AAA, that the power of a WWE and TKO can provide? Is this grander plans than just simply operating in Mexico? Is there an ability to truly navigate into the U.S. with further distribution, both with live events in TV? Is that sort of what you see as like the apex here of what WWE would want to get out of this, or keep it strictly to Mexico and cultivating that market as this is the brand of pro wrestling?
I think WWE does this with an idea that they want this both in Mexico and the U.S. and also other places long-term in Latin America, where they go to Chile or Brazil, or Argentina. This is their brand for everywhere in Latin America. I think WWE would like to add this to the portfolio of shows and promotions they run with those UFC, WWE, PBR weekends, where they would maybe have a AAA show and hopefully draw in a different fan base to those shows. But I think it's essential for them to make the value of this, to be able to run at least in the U.S. and in Mexico, and to leverage the WB stars who have come through Mexico at some point into this promotion to reinforce a roster that's kind of been withered away with defections and people just trying their opportunity elsewhere in the last few years for AAA. The biggest thing that's going to help them is that they should have access to a whole bunch of stars, where the roster has kind of thinned out in the last 18 to 36 months.
And we're going to have the co-CEO of Philippe on at the top of the hour. But what is your understanding of the relationship between Philippe and AAA up to this point? My understanding is that they've been pursuing AAA or some sort of ownership stake for some time. Does that sound right to you?
That sounds plausible to me. I was not familiar with Philippe until I saw their name mentioned as part of the sale. So they're interesting because they seem like they invest in a lot of different emerging businesses, and are Latino focused and are Mexican based. And I think that's going to help AAA because they need someone who understands just doing business in Mexico. But as far as beyond that, what they're going to offer specifically, I'm looking forward to listening to that conversation too, to find out what's going on.
How does you've noted the fact that there's like through your reporting around like 13 wrestlers that are under contract to AAA. Do you see that as like a given that is going to accelerate and they are strictly going to be dealing with talent that they have on paper as their core roster? Like, what do you think is their freelance strategy if there is one in this kind of post acquisition?
I believe that there's a lot of AAA people who appear on TV who I believe aren't under contract. I think WB will quickly try to sign them to a short-term, low guarantee deal just to keep things as they are for the next few months. On that podcast with Jose Manuel Guillen, he mentioned that he believes the plan is that AAA is going to run all the events that they currently have scheduled through the end of the year as planned. So I think you're going to see the addition of people from WWE, but they're going to try to keep most of the people around in AAA right now for the short term. But I think there's going to be a lot of evaluations and different people looking at wrestlers who are not in the ways they weren't looked before, and comings and goings in the next few months.
And the obvious question as well is the impact that this has short term and long term in regards to CMLL. Like, is this a promotion that you feel is going to be moved by this, affected by this? Is there do you expect there to be wholesale changes at any level in terms of like what this means for the Mexican market and having this level of just monetary power that is now behind AAA?
I think there's going to be an urgency to sign some of the more key wrestlers, make sure they're on their contracts. And the Mexican wrestling business has often been like handshake deals, not written stuff, because people just have not moved back and forth enough to really need to get things on paper. But I think that's obviously got to change right now. I think while there's a lot of Mexican wrestlers whose dream was going to Arena Mexico and wrestling in Arena Mexico, the globalization of wrestling, the YouTube of wrestling, where everyone can see everything. There's a lot of wrestlers who may have come from some small city in Mexico, but have grown up and watched WWE, and maybe they ended up in the CML system. But if WWE comes up and offers and says, if you go with us, we may make you may go all the way to WrestleMania like Rey Fénix did or Hijo del Vikingo did. There's going to be people who are going to be very tempted to make that decision. So I think it's going to be a much tougher offer for a much tougher battleground for CML to keep talent going forward. The one great advantage is that CML, especially in the last few years, has done a great job of developing and finding new talent. So I'm not worried about them running out of people, but they may have been a tougher competition for the top stars.
And just thinking back to when WWE has embraced stars who are becoming big in Mexico, I think right away of Mystico when they brought Mystico in I think it was 2011 or so. Now that's almost 15 years ago. But my impression of that is WWE didn't want him to wrestle a very Lucha Libre like style, and some of the things that made him special were reduced. Like, do you have confidence this is no longer the Vince McMahon era, it's Paul Levesque era, that wrestlers who maybe aren't accustomed to the WWE style are going to be able to show what made them stars in Mexico?
I don't have great confidence. I'm not really tuned in on the WWE product where I'm watching it that much, but I get the sense that the Dragon Lee that I saw in CML and AAA is not the Dragon Lee that's been in WWE the last couple of years, and that there have been other wrestlers who have had to change and modify their style. I know Triple H said, I'm a big fan of Lucha Libre, but his booking and his preferences has not shown that over the years. So I think that's going to be a big cultural change, because the people in Mexico still want to see that Lucha Libre style, but I think WWE has looked at it as the wrong way of doing things over the years. And one of those two things are going to have to change for this new arrangement to work.
In terms of just a public figure that has his own outlet, how do you feel Conan works into this whole arrangement between both promotions. Do you see him staying in his position? Do you look at him as an asset? What do you think would be the future of Conan with AAA?
I think Conan would very much like to be part of this, and I think it would make sense for WWE to keep him around because he's a guy who has a lot of knowledge about how Mexican wrestling works and has worked over the last 3 decades. But Conan is also a guy who's very opinionated and very free about sharing his opinions in various outlets. And I worry for his sake that like he's going to say the wrong thing at the wrong time, and it's going to put him in a bad situation. But like I can't imagine, he has his podcast where they seem to make good money of clipping up some of his more controversial comments and putting them on YouTube for clicks. And I'm not really sure that works well if you are also a WB employee.
As we wind down here, again, this is still very early in this whole transaction. What are some of the biggest questions that you have after all these days as someone that follows this as closer as anyone in the space?
I would say how much of what we've seen from AAA was still going to continue as expected for the rest of the year. I mean, they've built a promotion around Alberto El Patron, Alberto Del Rio, having a big match in August, and Alberto is has not been a well-received person in WB in recent years. It seems like they might not want him back, but he's what all AAA has been about. So how do they fix that? There's certain talent conflicts like that, but mostly it's like how there will definitely be changes in what AAA is going forward. It's just how quickly those changes will come. We'll look at scheduling. There'll be more shows in the U.S. Will we see a lot of participation from WWE wrestlers, or will they just be on the big shows? Will the format of the TV or the distribution change? Are they going to try to get them on Netflix, or do they want to strengthen them so they can be a competitor to AEW's Fox Sports Deportes deals? There's a lot of how they position the business going forward that I'm curious about.
And is Alberto is he a freelancer? Do we know what his status is with AAA beyond just as its champion?
I believe he's one of the guys who is under contract. So okay. That's something that WWE would have to decide how they're going to handle moving forward.
All right. Well, Cubs fan, we want to thank you very much for coming on. I encourage everyone to go over to luchablog.com. He has written extensively about just the early impressions since this news was made on Saturday, and I'm sure there will be plenty to follow in the days and weeks to come. And I hope we can have you back sometime, because I'm sure this is a story that's on the top of many people's mind in terms of what the short and long-term impact is going to be in Mexico and beyond that as well, if this is just the first step of a larger geographical strategy for WWE as well.
Yeah, and I would really encourage people to read the write-up that Cubs Fan did when this news came out, and just explaining everything to everybody. It's long, and it's a great read.
You're going to be hit up with a lot of questions, I think, online from a lot of folks over these next weeks, I'm sure. All right. Well, thank you very much, Cubs, for joining us. We thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, well, there you have it. And again, we are going to be joined by Barbara Gonzalez Brisano in just over 10 minutes, and hopefully we'll be getting some more thoughts and clarity on how this whole transaction went down, and maybe answering some of those questions. But before we do that, we are going to shift over to the program that is a must-see on the Thurston screen every day, and that is the Pat McAfee Show. He had a slew of wrestling guests over the last week, culminating with Dwayne Johnson's appearance on Tuesday. I don't even know if this was promoted in advance. They certainly did not promote it the night before on Raw. He just pops up, and Brandon, do you want to roll for us the highlight pack of Dwayne Johnson and getting into the mind of The Rock?
He's explaining, I guess, why he wasn't on WrestleMania, and just giving some insights. We'll play that clip.
As we got closer to Elimination Chamber, we were kicking ideas around, myself and Triple H, and that's the fun part, by the way. I've been kicking ideas around with Triple H for 20 years, dude. Just always having a great time with him and Nick and my team as well. And Triple H said, what about this? What about John turning? I said, I love it. I love it. The next question is you got to talk to John, see how he feels about it. I knew then the best thing for the final boss, we've established this idea of Cody's soul. We can always come back to it. I did feel, and I made the call, I don't want to be involved in that. Step back. Let the final boss step back into the shadows. Let all the spotlight go to John. Let it go to Cody. I was just as surprised to see Travis Scott as well, and I knew the moment I saw Travis, well, that immediately amplifies. Well, here comes the final boss. And so again,
yes,
I love.
Yes,
I mean, they were waiting.
Yeah, I think I texted you. I texted you as it was happening. Holy
you did.
Shit.
You were like, "Are you coming out?" And I was like, "No, dude. I would tell you if I'm coming out. I'm not kayfabing you." But again, I loved at the end of the day, North Star, John Cena, heel champion, 17, the GOAT, says he's going to ruin wrestling. Now we tune every week every week to see how it happens, how that goes down. Some parts of it I would have just adjust a little bit more. I would have finessed it a little bit more.
Adjust and finesse. Just some slight differences. So, yes, this is obviously going to be a very heavily analyzed, scrutinized interview by Dwayne Johnson and what his motivation was to go out there.
Subtext there, anything to translate?
Well, I would suggest that Dwayne Johnson, who I believe is a very online individual, I think would have noticed what the sentiment was, both going into WrestleMania and coming out of WrestleMania, that Dwayne Johnson was front and center as, I think, a source of a lot of criticism. And he came on, and I think this was very much in the vein of damage control and positioning, his thinking toward this. Now, just for context sake here, it was very interesting to note him bringing up the fact that Elimination Chamber ticket sales were slow.
Yeah, which is not in that quote that he did say that, yeah.
Yeah, he said that he got the call from Ari a month before the Elimination Chamber. Now, I did go back here, and WrestleTix, a month out from that event, was listed about 27,000 tickets out for Elimination Chamber. It ended up at like 37,500. That was the final number. And if you recall, and we definitely talked about this at the time, just probably days after this call, during the Super Bowl, you had Ari Emanuel on the Pat McAfee show teasing that some big things are going to be happening at the Elimination Chamber. So we would presume that had been in motion by probably that very week.
Was his appearance advertised ahead of time?
Ari's?
Rock's at Elimination Chamber.
Yes. Okay. He had showed up on TV. They had done the whole deal with Cody. I want your soul. Right. And the decision would have to be made at Elimination Chamber. So that goes through. The angle is pretty universally praised with the Cena turn, and then Dwayne Johnson disappears for the next few weeks, and you got his thought process there that my work is done. I don't want to overshadow this. And in that being his initiative, he overshadowed everything with his lack of presence rather than the concern that my presence would overshadow everything. And again, mysterious merchandise aside, this was, this very much paints a picture that I think you have seen many people report upon. Like this does feel as though a sort of a power play among creative visions, and this idea. This does back up like a lot of the reporting you have seen there. Like Dwayne Johnson as well, like just fully outlining this future heel turn for Cody Rhodes before and. Just days after Paul Levesque is complaining about people that are ruining future stories and ruining for people. I mean, it was a remarkable interview that I think will be leaned on heavily in hindsight by people to go through some of the lines and stories that he shared in this. It was a fascinating interview.
I would read from it. He was especially, he felt like some explanation was needed once Travis Scott did a run-in, and he did not, because naturally, once you see Travis Scott run-in, as he was involved in the Elimination Chamber angle, you would think that Dwayne Johnson might be involved as well. And he was apparently in Hawaii, looking, judging by his Instagram. You can look at some of his promos and some of his creative judgment. Reportedly, he wanted to do a Roman Reigns match last year and didn't seem to be connected to the reality that fans are really ready for a Cody Rhodes win. And you can look at some of his long and meandering promos that he's done earlier this year, and you can question his creative judgment. And you could see why, if you're the incumbent controlling creative, why you might be frustrated with that or feeling like you're not in control of how you want to tell the stories when this is a TKO board member and somebody who's very close to Ari Emanuel, who's your boss's boss. Maybe boss's boss. Yeah.
And I think it's a good comparison to listen to that, which occurred on Tuesday. And we go back to last week when Paul Levesque did this sit down with Peter Rosenberg on the WWE's social channels. And here was Paul Levesque with some frustrations that were coming to the forefront.
This will sound offensive. Every critic that is out there, I wish I could tell people off being a critic. Be a fan. Go watch this and be a fan. If I tell you go to the movies and watch this movie, I saw it's really good, and you just go to the movie as a fan, you watch the movie, you have one opinion. If I tell you, hey, go see this movie, but can you give me a one-page detail, like things on what you liked, what you didn't like, and if it worked for you or didn't work for you. You watch it totally differently, right? You watch the product totally differently. It ruins it for people. The world was so much better when nobody knew. They go out and they try to ruin the surprise, and I get it, that's their business, and they try to tell you the shit that's going on, and you just ruin it for people. The business that feeds you, you're now ruining it for people and lessening their enjoyment of it to a large degree because you're telling them all this right or wrong that is going to happen. The biggest thing I see right now on the internet is people thinking, oh, and then they're going to do this. Yeah, no, we're not. You know what I mean? And then The Rock's going to show up, and he's going to do this, and he's going to have the greatest match with this guy of all time. Well, except for his movie schedule, which doesn't permit him from doing anything in his time.
So there you have it. That was Paul Levesque, who seemed to be very upset. And I guess I won't even go so upset, more so just a certain frustration level. Which all of us get frustrated sometimes when things abruptly come at you and you have to think on the fly. Right, Brandon?
Yep, absolutely.
Unreal. But yeah, just your thoughts there on Hunter's comments. And I mean, more so at the end, like whatever, the online criticism is whatever you want to make of that. But at the end, specifically noting the Rock thing, like you can sense, like, Paul Levesque is a very astute guy. He has to be very much aware of a lot of the criticism of this build-up towards WrestleMania, the lack of Dwayne Johnson's appearance, and midweek, knowing the fact that we are not paying this off with a Dwayne Johnson appearance on Sunday as well, almost like bracing for that, which, again, he's noting this movie schedule, which Dwayne Johnson completely contradicts. Like, there was no scheduling issue here. This was a creative decision if you're listening to Dwayne Johnson's perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about spoilers, which is seems like what he's getting at there. Nobody's forcing anybody to have WrestleMania spoiled for them through whatever Fightful or The Observer is reporting. It's sort of going back to an old worry back from, I think, the 90s when the internet was in its emergence. And I remember, Jerry Lawler talking about how he was concerned that the Observer was going to kill the business because then everybody would understand what the creative operations were and everybody would understand that, professional wrestling is predetermined and it was going to, take the veil off of pro wrestling and it wasn't going to be able to draw money anymore. And clearly that has not happened.
All right. So there you have it, the Paul Levesque, Dwayne Johnson Chronicles. WWE also announced over the weekend the launch of their so we go from people that are just ruining everything. WWE Unreal. It's like we'll let the cat out of the bag when it is advantageous. They will be doing WWE Unreal, which Hunter's reasoning for this is that it's okay to talk about it after it's happened. Then we're talking about the making of. It's just You can't ruin things ahead of time. So this will be coming to Netflix. Their version of Drive to Survive that has been talked about. This would be coming this summer, and we got a few more bits of information on Monday when they put out a teaser for the series. The idea that we're going to take you right into the writer's room. People enhancing the image of the mysterious whiteboard with the WrestleMania lineup on it. And this will be 10 episodes, 50 minutes each. And this is going to be a combination. Omaha Productions is involved, NFL Films, WWE, and Skydance as well, all part of this. It's going to be an extremely high budget series that will probably be WWE's massive project of the summer to promote. And there's going to be tremendous interest in this.
Yeah, and it's part of a marketing campaign to feature Paul Levesque as the person who's the leader of the company, which is not unlike a lot of historical examples of professional wrestling, where you put the booker or the top executive. He's the person who's reliable, who's going to be there for years and years, and we will see. What the whiteboard said and what the matches were that didn't come to fruition. But I don't see it as a concern that it's going to be the last bastion of kayfabe that's going to be lost. I feel like there's been numerous documentaries and behind the scenes looks at wrestling, and this just may be a far better promoted one.
Also coming out this week, there was a vote held in Orlando on Tuesday with the Greater Orlando Sports Commission that was seeking funding to put together a bid for a multitude of TKO events. And Jason Siegel, who is the president and CEO of the Greater Orlando Sports Commission, issued this statement after the vote was conducted. Quote, "Thank you to the Orange County Commissioners for supporting our funding application to secure 4 WWE and UFC events from 2026 through 2031. Having worked alongside the commissioners for the last several years, I've seen firsthand the dedication and strategic thinking they bring to attracting impactful events to Central Florida. Orlando has previously hosted WrestleMania twice at Camping World Stadium, most recently in 2017, and we're thrilled to have the opportunity to build on that legacy. Our region's ability to consistently deliver unforgettable experiences speaks volumes about our collective commitment to excellence. In addition to driving economic impact, we look forward to collaborating with the commissioners and many other local partners to create moments that elevate Orlando on the global stage and enhance the quality of life for our residents." So what has happened here is that they have been approved for $18 million for this to move ahead. And there is a sports incentive fund that has been funded at $10 million per year, which is where the funds that they have applied for are being derived from over this several year period. And this, before you get ahead of yourselves, this is just this Greater Orlando Sports Commission now having the funding to go after these events. TKO obviously still has to accept this bid. It's not a done deal yet. They have the tools in place to now make these bids.
They have to accept what was the dollar figure again?
$18 million was approved for this package, which would be spread out over these WWE and UFC events.
I was a little confused about just how much money it was. There's this language about it, as well as increasing the sports incentive funds from $4 million to $10 million each year. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that. But yes, Orlando was considering, according to a public hearing, they were considering making a bid, or maybe did make a bid for Orlando's for Royal Rumble 2024, the Royal Rumble that ended up being in Tampa St. Pete instead. So they're still certainly looking for the big WWE events, but this will go towards attracting UFC events as well.
Okay, let's go through just the last few news items, and then we will give you our guest update situation. ROH Supercard of Honor, it's been moved from May 2nd in Atlantic City. They are now going to attach it to the All-In Texas weekend. So it will now happen July the 11th at the Esports Stadium in Arlington, Texas. And they have also announced Death Before Dishonor on September the 5th at the 2300 Arena, while also canceling I believe, May 17th date for Collision in Wichita, Kansas. So they are adjusting their ROH schedule, not running a pay-per-view, or at least their Honor Club event on May 2nd, and instead we'll just make this another event as part of its big All-In Texas week.
Yeah, these are two events that...
Yeah, never mind.
Yes.
All in Texas.
These are two events that, as of WrestleTix last estimates of them, there are under 2,000 tickets distributed. I don't know, they were expecting a lot more than that for a Ring of Honor show, but for the Wichita Collision show, you could see maybe a week advance that contributed to this show being canceled, which is now going to be part of the Hoffman Estates just outside of Chicago Dynamite taping on May 14th. So that will now, instead of just being a Dynamite taping as it was originally scheduled, will now be a Dynamite and a Collision taping It's going to be branded Beach Break.
Beach Break, yes. How do you feel about a 4-hour television block next month for AEW?
Is that going to happen?
Yes, they've announced a 4-hour Wednesday night block.
From 8 to midnight?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, that's 4 hours, yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time. WWE as well, they have pretty much outlined their most of their PLE schedule for the rest of the year. So we've got Backlash coming up in a few weeks, May 10th in St. Louis. Then they have announced June 7th, it'll be Worlds Collide in the afternoon in LA, and then that Sunday night on June 7th, Money in the Bank at the Intuit Dome. The next events are technically not until the 2-night SummerSlam, although in between, we have not got the Saudi shows announced yet for this year. I would think that there's probably going to be a Saudi show in there. The 2 nights at SummerSlam. Then we go to Clash in Paris at the end of August. There is a October PLE that will now happen in Perth, along with a Raw and SmackDown that they confirmed over the weekend, and the addition of Survivor Series, November the 29th, outdoors at Petco Park in San Diego, California.
Yes. First time stadium show for Survivor Series, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And outdoors, no less. So, I mean, that's they're
San Diego.
Yeah, it's San Diego. It's weather should hopefully not be an issue there at that point of the year. So there you go. Those are all of your announcements. All right. So we were scheduled to have Barbara Gonzalez Brisano on the show, and we got a message 9 minutes ago that they are going to have to reschedule. So we will absolutely reschedule with them, and we will do our best to reconvene and bring you that interview. I sincerely apologize that we promoted this and out of our control. So on that note, we will end this. Any other? Did you have anything else, Brandon, before we wrap things up?
Should we talk about why I wasn't in Las Vegas, or save it till next week?
No, let's talk about this. So I had asked you several times throughout the lead up, are you going to be going to WrestleMania? And this was it was up in the air. You didn't know yes or no. You ultimately did not go to Las Vegas. Why?
So I was planning going and had a hotel and travel plans booked, but it's WrestleMania and the ticket sales are very much in demand. So I figured the only way I was really going to go is if I was credentialed by WWE and attended the press conference. Hopefully, you never know. But I realized that I hadn't received the credential application yet. And once I realized we had not received press releases in quite some time, since about early February. And I followed up and tried to get the application, tried to attend as media, and I got no response. So I figured, they were not going to credential me, so I did not go. It seemed like WWE, looking back on when we last got press releases, it looks like maybe something happened in early February, sometime just after Royal Rumble. Which is actually before I did the reports on WWE employee morale and WWE employee benefits that were cut and raises that were expected that didn't happen. So it wasn't even because of that was the last straw, or if anything happened. So we debated whether even to bring this up, but I figured since we had talked about it, and since people might ask me why I'm not at press conferences, I wanted to make it clear that it's not by my choice.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, I'll state, and just to be clear, I know Elimination Chamber was here in Toronto, and people were like, why weren't you at Elimination Chamber? I had a vacation planned. I never even applied to go to Elimination Chamber, nor did I apply to go to WrestleMania either. So I haven't gone through, I have not been, turned down for anything. But I'm also, of the belief that, listen, I've been doing this like a ridiculous amount of time. I've gone through these things, in, out, whatever. Like it really does not affect either one of us in terms of like the day to day of like what we do. Like it's a pretty specific thing that we do. Personally, I think Brandon should be at these press conferences, even if I cannot. But it's also not the end of the day either, and is not going to really bear any issue for us beyond that.
We don't know if there's a specific reason. I assume that
we've asked. Listen, we've reached out. It's not like we're just guessing here, but I mean, they can certainly clarify at any point to us. They have all of our information and we've inquired. So it's like, again, I don't have like some smoking gun to say, hey, this is the reason why they wouldn't get back to Brandon or something like that. But anyway, I didn't really want to talk about this, but I feel we owe you at least like that transparency, and I feel like we should put that out there. So,
and I do feel like people are naturally going to ask, after I've not been to a press conference in quite some time, why I haven't been. So, and we did discuss it previously on this program. Yeah, and for that reason, like I totally did understand that point and want to put it out there. So, on that note, I want to thank the Cubs fan for appearing on the show. Again, you can go follow all of his work over at luchablog.com. We have been told they will reschedule Barbara for us. I will be very adamant about pushing for that, and we'll do our best. Again, I really hate promoting things and then not delivering them. It drives me nuts. So please appreciate my frustration on that front. In the meantime, Brandon has lots of stuff up at patreon.com/WrestleNomics, including going through the latest Netflix data for not just last week's Raw, but the first 2 nights of WrestleMania. India, for the first time, WWE programming showing up in the top 10 for the first night of WrestleMania. I believe it did register. And all of the latest data for WrestleMania and the surrounding events, that can be found patreon.com/WrestleNomics. You could also subscribe to his work over on Substack. Yes, all of the TV ratings reports, all the data reports that have TV ratings in them and more, attendance analysis, YouTube, and the reception analysis, all that is on Patreon and Substack now. It's $5, either one you want. And over at postwrestlingcafe.com, I've just put up a review of the recent WrestleMania 9 documentary that dropped on Peacock, as well as my thoughts on the WWE Hall of Fame ceremony. $6 gets you 30 days access on the Post Wrestling Cafe. I'm going to be back tonight with Braden Harrington and Jordan Goodman. We're going to be chatting about Dynamite, probably a little bit more about the Dwayne Johnson interview, get some of their thoughts on it. All of that can be found postwrestling.com. Want to thank everybody for joining us live today. We're back next Wednesday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time here at Post Wrestling and WrestleNomics.